All right, let me just preface really quick. So on the left, because some of you don't know who they are. On the left, you have MoistCr1TiKaL. On the right, you have Sneako. Okay? MoistCr1TiKaL, I believe, from my understanding, is going to be defending a lot of interesting woke ideologies like transing kids. And then you got Sneako on the right, who is going to be defending his desire to remove the age of consent laws or something along those lines, which is just, it's all very odd stuff. This entire debate is going to be, you're probably not going to like either candidate. So I want to make that very clear. All right. But we are in a strange world where MoistCr1TiKaL makes somebody like Sneako look good. All right. So I'm pressing play and I'm not going to talk until I find something to talk about. So here we go. This is going to be a debate of autistic level. All right. A debate of autistic levels. 3, 2, 1, go.
Why are you so insistent on like the age of consent being like unreasonable? Or at least that's the impression I and most people gather from the way you speak about it.
That's a valid question, and I want to first ask, like, what's your issue with my opinion on the age of consent, age of marriage?
Because I feel like age of consent should just be an accepted number, and I think the accepted one is 18. Like, regardless of where you talk about in the world, I feel like once you start talking about someone under 18, you're basically just talking like a predator. Like, I feel like 18 is a pretty well-established number for most sensible people. At 18, you're going to college, you're living your own life now, you're outside of your family nest. Anything under that, you're still a kid.
Okay. It's not 18 in most of the United States where we both live, right?
Yeah, but that refers to like Romeo and Juliet laws, where if you're like 19 and with a 16-year-old, it's not technically illegal, but you're not a 19-year-old, right? So why would you be arguing for like a 16,
well, First of all, I'm not arguing to lower the age of consent. I don't believe in the age of consent. We can get there. I want to establish some terms first.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's not even just with Romeo and Juliet laws. There's a lot of states where it's 16 regardless of Romeo and Juliet. And then you go to Europe, most countries are 16. Japan, I think they just changed it. It was like 13 or 14, and now it's 16. Brazil, it's 14. I saw that from a Nelk Boys video. They were joking around about how they should, like, when in Rome, they're in Brazil, so they might as well sleep with a 14-year-old, right? Or across the world, 18. I want to see, like, why do you think 18 is the age of consent?
Because that right now is the one that makes the most sense. I guess to piggyback off what you're saying, so if you're traveling right now, if you go to Europe, are you going to be comfortable like hooking up with a 16-year-old? Like, just because it's legal there, would that make you feel comfortable?
No, I don't hook up anymore. I'm not
saying that you do, but I'm saying if you were, single and looking for someone, would you feel comfortable with it being a 16-year-old if it's in Europe versus US?
I wouldn't do that. Like, I would not have sex before. I think sex, like, out of wedlock altogether is something that we should not encourage anymore. And having the age of consent, having that idea encourages people to have premarital sex, right? Just that term, age of consent, means you're consenting to something that we shouldn't be doing. So no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex, would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old? Nothing sexual.
I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations. I like to be with women that are around my same age, because then I can have conversations. I like to relate to them. I think there'd be too much of a gap. But other people, like, if they're able to get along, then I don't see why that's so much of a problem.
But why don't you see that as a problem? So for you, you're recognizing like this person's much younger than me. It is a kid. Like, you are talking to.
Okay, so let's define these terms. Let's
in high school.
Really quick, guys. I see a lot of you guys in the chat right now asking where did Charlie lose? Guys, it's really early in the debate. Okay, they're talking about this particular topic right now. But when it gets into like the transing of kids and all that shit, that's when Charlie kind of shows his face. So trust me. They're both gonna look bad here. I'm not showing this to necessarily say one is the winner over the other. But I think overall, in terms of a really fucking bad look, I think MoistCr1TiKaL looks probably worse. And as crazy as that sounds, because Sneako looks really bad here. But again, it just started. So please give it some time. It just started. It's a wild fucking discussion. Okay, just wait. Just wait.
Before we even get into, let's define these terms before we even get into this conversation. What is a child?
I would use the age of consent. Under 18 would be a kid in my eyes.
So a 17-year-old who's 364 days, that's a kid?
Yep, I'm gonna use very hard set terms. If it is under 18, even if it's 17, 364, that's still a kid.
That's a kid. Okay,
I think it's important to have these hard lines in the sand where it doesn't have this kind of wiggle room.
Okay, why does that define kid?
As I said earlier, at 18, at that point, you're going out of high school, you're going to college, you're living on your own, you're no longer, a child under your parents' roof, for the most part, extenuating circumstances, of course. But at that age, you are starting to become independent. You are no longer just in your parents' household a kid. You are now going off into the world on your own.
You do admit that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone as that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because I don't think anybody clips that I played in the video, you were saying like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip. So for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
It actually hasn't. Right, 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage.
Yeah, we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying you're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10, and the U.K. was 7. Right. So if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college. They don't leave the house until this age. The brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you can use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally.
Also, just really quick, keep in mind that age of consent was a lot lower back in the day, not just from an ideological standpoint, but that's simply because people just didn't live as long. You had people averaging their death in their 30s. So people dying in their 30s, of course, they're probably going to get their lives started much earlier. You know what I mean? When 15, 16 years old is considered an average half-life point, I mean, chances are 200 years ago, that's probably where it's gonna be. But now that, fucking 70, 80 years old is usually the age where people live, and life expectancy is a lot longer, rules change and points of view change and outlooks change and all that stuff, so you can't compare it to 200 years ago. I think that's a fucking wild take, man. Comparing it to, oh, well, that's how it was 200 years ago. Yeah, well, you're not going to probably die at 35 like you were 200 years ago. So yeah, that's just a very, very weird outlook.